right. Okay. So all of us, we know that we are doing this study on the royal review, studying the kings of Israel and Judah, and we've made quite good progress. Like every week I do, let me just take you through, what we've covered so far. We started this study by looking at the United Kingdom of Israel, where three kings ruled: Saul, David, and Solomon. None of them were perfect, but God used them. So this was at the time when Israel as a nation was one kingdom, the United Kingdom. After Solomon, the kingdom divided into two. His son Rehoboam did not do a good job in handling it. So Jeroboam revolted. And of course, Solomon is also to be blamed about it. So the kingdom divided after Solomon. The northern kingdom was called Israel, and the southern kingdom was called Judah. So after this, after Solomon, the Bible talks about Israel, Judah. So there were kings in Israel and there were kings in Judah. Now, when you look at this chart about the kings in Israel and Judah, I had said that in our study, we will also see which prophet prophesied under which king, না কোন ভবিষ্যবক্তা কোন রাজার আন্ডারে ও ভবিষ্যবাণী করেছিল। তো যেরকম আমরা দেখি ইসরায়েলের দিকে, so far we only have prophets who are ministering to Israel. Judah side has not started yet. They are mostly ministering to Israel, but each of these prophets are also speaking and prophesying to Judah as well. But their main focus has been Israel so far. So when the kingdom got divided into two, under Jeroboam, you can see there was Ahijah. And then after that, under Nadab, Basha, Elah, Zimri, Tibni, Omri, Ahab, till Omri, there were prophets, but they were not very popular prophets. But it's not like there were no prophets. There were a lot of prophets at that time. And then from Ahab's time, the Bible talks about Elijah. So Prophet Elijah, we all know him, did a lot of miracles, both Elijah and Elisha. So Elijah was the prophet under Ahab, Ahaziah, and Joram. And Elisha was the prophet under Joram, Jehu, and Jehoahaz. So till 796, you had these prophets, Elijah and Elisha, who were mainly prophesying for Israel, against Israel. Into same time, these prophets were also prophesying in Judah. Okay, they were talking to the kings of Judah as well, which we'll see today, like to Ahaziah, to Jehoram, all of them. Elijah, Elisha, they also prophesied. So far, these are the three prophets. And after this, as we continue doing the studies on the kings, we will see some more prophets. Okay. So let me take you to today's chapter. Like I said, we will do two kings today. First kings will be from Second Chronicles, Jehoram, who was the son of Jehoshaphat. You'll remember last week we finished Jehoshaphat. গত সপ্তাহে আমরা কিং জেহোশাফাতকে দেখলাম, আজকেও ছেলে জেহোরামকে দেখবো। Okay, so today we are seeing Jehoram, and we'll also see Ahaziah. Now there is a confusion with Ahaziah. Okay, there's one Ahaziah in Judah and one Ahaziah in Israel. So we look at Ahaziah in Israel because it's a very short period that he's there, and Ahaziah of Judah, Ahaziah or Ahaziah, whatever, we'll see this guy next week. But today we'll see Jehoram of Judah and Ahaziah of Israel. Let me read this first for Jehoram, Second Chronicles 21, 4 to 11. When Jehoram established himself firmly over his father's kingdom, he put all his brothers to the sword, along with some of the officials of Israel. Now, let me take a pause here. Okay, I'll go back to the chart again. If you go to the chart and see the kings of Judah, you will see that Jehoshaphat reigned from 870 to 845. Then his son Jehoram came 853 to 842. But the time says that Jehoshaphat was king till 845. Then how did Jehoram become king in 853? Now, the thing is, like I told you a few weeks back, in those days, when one of the kings would become weak or unable to rule, they would ask their, next in line, their children, their son to rule. This is exactly what happened with Jehoram. Okay, so Jehoshaphat was there, and then Jehoram also started continuing ruling, and he was not the real king till Jehoshaphat died. Okay, so only after Jehoshaphat died that he was able to, finally set himself, establish himself firmly over his father's kingdom. Okay, he put all his brothers to the sword along with some of the officials of Israel. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. Now, you remember last week we saw Jehoshaphat through this marriage became friends with Ahab, and God was not happy with Jehoshaphat. This is the reason. This Jehoram was the one who married a daughter of Ahab. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, because of the covenant the Lord had made with David, the Lord was not willing to destroy the house of David. He had promised to maintain a lamp for him and his descendants forever. In the time of Jehoram, Edom rebelled against Judah and set up its own king. So Jehoram went there with his officers and all his chariots. The Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, but he rose up and broke through by night. To this day, Edom has been in rebellion against Judah. Verse 10 again is an addition. Okay, it happened later. It was added later. Okay, like I told you, the final copy of the Old Testament we got after editing was done, after some additions were done. Libnah revolted at the same time because Jehoram had forsaken the Lord, the God of his ancestors. He had also built high places on the hills of Judah and had caused the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves and had led Judah astray. Now, this is how Jehoram is being introduced in Chronicles. Okay, very details are given. And I have marked few portions in red, which basically talks about two of his major decisions that was, negative, that did not work for him. Now, one, he married the daughter of Ahab. That was not a good decision. Second, he had forsaken the Lord, the God of his ancestors. Okay. So when you look at Jehoram, I want to suggest that Jehoram talks about the impact of our decisions. Okay. Some of the decisions that we make, all the decisions have an impact. Okay. Not just on us, but also on the generations to come. So when we look at Jehoram, king of Judah, we recognize that his decisions also have had impact. Not just his, but also Jehoshaphat, his father's. Okay. So what was the impact of the decision? Number one, what was Jehoshaphat's decision? Jehoshaphat's decision, you remember from last week, he allowed Jehoram, his son, to marry Ahab's daughter. And he became friends with Ahab. Now, Jehoshaphat was a very God-fearing king. He wanted to honor God. Ahab of Israel was completely opposite. Jehoshaphat was king of Judah. Ahab, the evil, was the king of Israel. But yet, Jehoshaphat decided to go ahead with this marriage and become, friends with Ahab. That led to the murder of his sons, right? What does the Bible say about Jehoram? He put all his brothers to the sword along with some of the officials of Israel. Okay, this is an impact. This is, the fruits of some of the decisions that we do. Now, the consequences of our decisions. Okay, who would have thought that Jehoshaphat's decision to allow his son to get married or to become friends with an evil king would result in such evil? Okay, so that was Jehoshaphat's decision. Second thing, Jehoram's decision led to revolt. So there was no peace. Remember, peace was a sign that God was happy with the king. Okay, but here is Jehoram. His decision led to revolt, so there was no peace, like we saw in these verses, right? Because Libnah revolted at the same time, because Jehoram had forsaken, Edom had revolted. So this was the impact of his decision. One was Jehoshaphat's decision, led to the murder of his sons. The next was Jehoram's decision, led to revolt, no peace. Okay, and when we are looking at Jehoram's life, please remember the decisions we make have an impact. Okay, have a consequence. That is what we see from Jehoram's life. Okay, let's continue reading from verses 12 to 20. Jehoram received a letter from Elijah the prophet. See, again, I said, right, Elijah was mainly prophesying to Israel, but now he's writing a letter to Jehoram, the king of Judah. Okay, so both ways they were prophesying. Jehoram received a letter from Elijah the prophet, which said, "This is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. You have not followed the ways of your father Jehoshaphat or of Asa, king of Judah, but you have followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and you have led Judah and the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves, just as the house of Ahab did. You have also murdered your own brothers, members of your own family, men who were better than you. So now the Lord is about to strike your people, your sons, your wives, and everything that is yours with a heavy blow. You yourself will be very ill with a lingering disease of the bowels until the disease causes your bowels to come out." The Lord aroused against Jehoram the hostility of the Philistines and of the Arabs who lived near the Cushites. They attacked Judah, invaded it, and carried off all the goods found in the king's palace, together with the sons and wives. Not a son was left to him, except Ahaziah the youngest. After all this, the Lord afflicted Jehoram with an incurable disease of the bowels. In the course of time, at the end of the second year, his bowels came out because of the disease and he died in great pain. His people made no funeral fire in his honor as they had for his predecessors. What a sad way, right? His bowels coming out. I have no idea, what pain it would have been. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He passed away to no one's regret and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. So sad, right, for Jehoram? Again, I'm saying the decisions we make have a consequence. Because he did so much evil, the people did not even regret. What a sad way to lead a life, right? He passed away to no one's regret. That is what the Bible talks about Jehoram. Okay. When he killed his brothers, he thought he was a very powerful king. He was a very successful king. But when he died, God punished him. So that is what we see, right? The impact of our decisions. Number three, no one regretted Jehoram's death. And then finally, we recognize that, he even died such a painful death, right? That's the impact of our decisions. So Jehoshaphat's decision led to the murder of his sons. Jehoram's decisions led to revolt. And Jehoram's decision also led to his death that no one regretted. Such was the life of Jehoram. So this is what we learn from Jehoram, right? So this is the little that the Bible talks about him and the fact that, our decisions have an impact. Now let's look at the second king, Ahaziah. That is from Second Kings chapter 1. So Ahaziah is Ahab's son. This is Israel. Okay. After Ahab's death, Moab rebelled against Israel. Now Ahaziah had fallen through the lattice of his upper room in Samaria and injured himself. So he sent messengers saying to them, go and consult Baalzebub, the god of Ekron, to see if I will recover from this injury. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, go up and meet the messengers of the king of Samaria and ask them, is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going off to consult Baalzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore, this is what the Lord says. You will not leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die. So Elijah went. When the messengers returned to the king, he asked them, why have you come back? A man came to us, they replied, and he said to us, go back to the king who sent you and tell him, this is what the Lord says. Is it because there is no God in Israel that you are sending messengers to consult Baalzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore, you will not leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die. The king asked them, what kind of man was it who came to meet you and told you this? They replied, he had a garment of hair and had a leather belt around his waist. The king said, that was Elijah the Tishbite. Now, this Baalzebub, as you can see, was also a god that in the New Testament, Jesus was also accused of being, a partners with Baalzebub, if you remember, right? Jesus was, healed a deaf and mute person. And when he healed, this is what people said. The reason he's able to heal is because, prince of demons, he's Baalzebub. And as a result, he's able to heal. Now, what is this thing about Baalzebub? Okay, why? Why did even this king send his messengers to go to Baalzebub, the god of Ekron? And why was Jesus also, connected or associated with Baalzebub? There are a few reasons you need to understand. Number one, Baalzebub means, Baal means Lord, Zebub means flies. Okay. So the name literally means Lord of the Flies. Now, why Lord of the Flies? Reason is, flies were always connected with pest and sickness. So what could the Lord of the Flies do? The Lord of the Flies, Baalzebub, could bring healing because he controls the flies. In those days, flies means pest sickness. Even now, when you see flies anywhere, either something is rotting or something like that, right? So in those days, the god of Ekron was Baalzebub, that is Lord of the Flies. Because he could control these pests, he was Lord over the flies, he was Lord over these pests, he had control over the sickness. And as a result, he could bring healing. That is the reason why Ahaziah told his servants that go and consult Baalzebub, whether I'll be healed or no. Why? Because Baalzebub in those days was considered to be the Lord of healing because he was Lord of the flies. And that is the reason why Jesus was also connected with Baalzebub. Why? Because Jesus was also doing a lot of healing. And so they assumed that this has to be the prince of demon. He's doing it with the help of Baalzebub because Baalzebub, is able to heal. Baalzebub is able to bring curse. Baalzebub is able to kill people. So this was the god of the healing. Okay, so that is the reason why Ahaziah sends his message to Baalzebub, and that is the reason also why Jesus was associated, accused of being, having Baalzebub in him and being the prince of demons. Okay, so this is what we need to keep in mind. in ancient church history, Beelzebub is considered to be a very, very powerful demon. Okay, that's ancient church history uh, and things like that. So this is something that we can keep in mind. Let's continue. Then he sent to Elijah a captain with his company of 50 men. This is King Ahaziah sending. The captain went up to Elijah, who was sitting on top of a hill, and said to him, Man of God, the king says, Come down. Elijah answered the captain, If I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. Then fire fell from heaven and consumed the captain and his men. At this, the king sent to Elijah another captain with his 50 men. The captain said to him, Man of God, this is what the king says, Come down at once. If I am a man of God, Elijah replied, May fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. Then the fire of God fell from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men. Now, there is something about Elijah and fire from heaven. You remember when he was fighting with the prophets of Baal, that time also fire came down from heaven and burned the offering that was actually soaked in water. The altar was filled with water and fire from heaven came down. So there is something about Elijah and the fire that comes from heaven. And he was very confident, okay, that fire will come down from heaven whenever he wants it. So that was like his anointing. That was like his gift. Verse 13 onwards. So the king sent a third captain with his 50 men. This third captain went up and fell on his knees before Elijah. Man of God, he begged, Please have respect for my life and the lives of these 50 men, your servants. See, fire has fallen from heaven and consumed the first two captains and all their men, but now have respect for my life. The angel of the Lord said to Elijah, Go down with him. Do not be afraid of him. So Elijah got up and went down with him to the king. So now you see how it worked out, right? See, the third captain, his attitude was very different in approaching Elijah. The others were approaching. See, the thing with written literature is that we don't understand the tone sometimes. We think that everybody's talking in the same way, everybody's being polite. But no, the first two captains came, with the authority of the king. They knew their king was more powerful than this prophet. Who's this prophet? So they came with a sense of defiance. And as a result, Elijah showed who's the boss. But the third captain came with a lot of humility. So even though the words are the same, but understand that the tone and the way of delivering the message was different for these three captains. That is the reason the first two captain, died because of the fire from heaven. And the third captain, nothing happened and God spared his life and Elijah also spared the life. Verse 16 says, Elijah told the king, This is what the Lord says. Is it because there is no God in Israel for you to consult that you have sent messengers to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Because you have done this, you will never leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die. So he died, according to the word of the Lord that Elijah had spoken. Because Ahaziah had no son, Joram succeeded him as king in the second year of Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. As for all the other events of Ahaziah's reign and what he did, are they not written in the annals of the kings of Israel? So, this is again another book, the annals of the kings of Israel, that has a lot of information about the kings of Israel. The annals of the kings of Judah have a lot of information about the kings of Judah. Okay, these are historical accounts from where, the Bible took, consulted, borrowed, and as a result, we have what we have now. Okay, so this is where Ahaziah's story ends. He died, had no son, so Joram succeeded him as king in the second year of Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. And so Joram and all we'll see next week. Now, what we learn from Ahaziah's life? Okay, a few things. Number one, he was very attracted to worldly things. Look at Beelzebub. Okay, repeatedly God is telling, is there no God in Israel that you're going after the gods of Ekron? Okay, and sometimes we may not run after Beelzebub, but we run after so many things we get attracted to. We get attracted to tradition, we get attracted to worldly things, we get attracted to a lot of different things. Okay, and Isaiah teaches us that we need to be very careful to what we get attracted to. কোন দিকে আমরা আকর্ষিত হচ্ছি সেটা খুব খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ আমাদের মনে রাখতে হবে. And second thing we learned from him, because of this, he was condemned to die. Okay, so death, everybody will die. It's not like no one will die. Death, everybody will die. But here you see Jehoram in the previous passage we saw, and now Ahaziah, both of them were condemned to die, and both of them died of sickness. Okay, especially for them, it was a punishment from God. Remember, sickness is not always a punishment from God. There were times when Jesus healed people, and the disciples asked Jesus, remember in the Gospels, that Master, whose fault was it that, this man was born blind? Or whose fault was it that this man needed healing? And Jesus said, nobody's fault, it is for God's glory. So please understand, when it comes to sickness, not all sicknesses are punishment from God. There are certain sicknesses that are meant only for God's glory. But when you look at Jehoram and Ahaziah, remember that there are certain of these sicknesses, especially what they had, it was definitely a punishment from God. How do we know which sickness is a punishment from God and which is not? We ourselves are to know, right? We can't judge for the others, but we ourselves are to know. Ahaziah and Jehoram both knew that their sickness and their death was a punishment from God and a condemnation from God. Okay, so both these kings, one of Israel and one of Jehoram, I don't know what happened, in those days when both the kings of Israel and Judah were evil. What happened to the people of Israel? I don't know. What happened to the Jewish people? I don't know. But usually there was one good king, one bad king. One good king, one evil king. But there are instances like this. Both kings are evil, both doing evil things, both into idolatry. What would happen to the Jewish people? We can never imagine. Okay. But remember, it was these kings and the decisions that they took that actually led Israel and Judah into captivity. Both nations became exile, and we'll see that as we continue with our study. Okay. So with this, we end our study for this evening. I'll give the time over to Shubhankar to felicitate the discussions.